Colonel Sarah Mitchell walked into a small grocery store on a quiet weekend afternoon in Denver, Colorado, dressed in a simple white blouse, blue jeans, and sneakers.
She blended effortlessly with the crowd of ordinary shoppers, her unassuming appearance giving no hint of the remarkable career she had spent defending her country and leading hundreds of soldiers on the battlefield. Sarah cherished these quiet moments.
She blended effortlessly with a crowd of ordinary shoppers, her unassuming appearance giving no hint of the remarkable career she had spent defending her country and leading hundreds of soldiers on the battlefield. Sarah cherished these quiet moments, picking up essentials by herself after long, demanding days. But the peace of the afternoon was soon disrupted by a seemingly minor incident that revealed the true character of a man standing at the end of the aisle. A tall man in a police uniform, Officer Daniel Harris, accidentally dropped a bag of chips and a bottle of soda on the floor. Sarah paused, watching as Daniel glanced at the mess, and then walked away casually, leaving the clutter behind. As a soldier, Sarah was trained to pay attention to detail and to take responsibility in everything she did. Daniel's careless actions and indifferent attitude made it impossible for her to remain silent. She stepped forward, her voice calm but clear. "Excuse me, sir, you just dropped a few things. Maybe you should pick them up so as not to inconvenience others." Instead of apologizing, Daniel turned his cold gaze towards Sarah, as if she didn't deserve his attention. With a disdainful smirk, he replied, "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? I don't have time to worry about trivial matters." Faced with his arrogance, Sarah remained composed, her eyes steady and serious as she responded, "As a police officer, you have a responsibility to set an example for the community. Picking up after yourself isn't just polite, it's a sign of respect for everyone here." But Sarah's words didn't make Daniel aware of his responsibility. Instead, he grew sarcastic, continuing to lash out with offensive remarks. What had started as a small act of carelessness quickly escalated into a tense confrontation. The atmosphere in the grocery store shifted as the crowd began to pay attention, their curious eyes darting between Sarah and Daniel. Sarah could feel the weight of their gazes, but she stood tall, facing Daniel's challenge head-on, ready to defend her point of view despite his prejudice and insults. Daniel glanced at Sarah again, his eyes full of contempt. He stood tall and smug, with no intention of following her advice. In her heart, Sarah felt a surge of anger, but with the composure of a seasoned army officer, she controlled her emotions brilliantly. Her years on the battlefield had taught her that calmness and decisiveness could resolve even the most stressful situations. She took a deep breath, keeping her voice calm but firm. "Sir, this isn't just a small matter. You're wearing a police uniform, and everyone here is watching you. Doing something as simple as picking up after yourself isn't just a citizen's responsibility. It's a way of representing your profession." Her words were a warning, but instead of listening, Daniel smirked, his laugh full of mockery and arrogance. "Listen," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You seem to think you know a lot about the responsibilities of a police officer, but you don't really know anything. This isn't worth worrying about, and to be honest, you should mind your own business." Sarah sensed the curious gazes from the people around her. Some had even started pulling out their phones to film the scene, but she didn't let it distract her. In her heart, she was angry, not just at Daniel's irresponsibility, but at the injustice she and so many others had suffered. This insult wasn't just a personal matter. It represented a larger pattern of social prejudice she had fought to overcome throughout her career. Sarah remained still, unflinching, her eyes gleaming with determination as she looked directly at Daniel. "You're judging the wrong person," she said, her voice soft but full of power. "You may not realize it, but the way you're behaving now will have consequences, not just for me, but for you as well." Daniel smirked, not believing her words, but behind Sarah's calm exterior, anger and steadfastness simmered. She knew this wasn't just a small argument. It was a moment for her to stand up for herself and the values she had always believed in. Faced with Daniel's defiant attitude and insulting words, Sarah felt anger rise in her heart, but she didn't allow it to overwhelm her. Her eyes were cold as she looked directly at him, not flinching in the slightest. Daniel still stood there with a sarcastic smile, his eyes full of contempt, as if he was waiting for Sarah to lose control. But instead of responding with anger, she chose to use the reason and bravery of a seasoned commander. "I'm not here to argue," Sarah said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I just want to remind you that your actions not only affect others, but also reflect who you are as a police officer. You should know your responsibilities better than anyone else." Sarah's sharp words made the surrounding crowd pay closer attention. Some people stopped shopping altogether, pausing to watch the unfolding drama. Daniel, feeling the weight of the eyes on him, decided to use arrogance to hide his embarrassment. He laughed, the sound echoing in the small aisle of the grocery store. "Responsibility?" Daniel sneered, his voice full of sarcasm. "Who are you to explain that to me? Just a mediocre woman, nothing more, nothing less. Don't think you have the right to stand here and tell me what to do. You don't understand anything about my work." Daniel's sexist and dismissive rhetoric was a blow to Sarah's self-esteem, but instead of letting her emotions dominate, she took a deep breath, keeping her eyes steadfast. She knew full well that her actions at this moment could serve as a testament to the difference between her and Daniel, a true leader versus someone who abused their power. "I don't need you to understand who I am," Sarah replied, her voice calm but weighty. "But I want you to understand that everyone in this society deserves to be treated with respect. If you can't do that, then you're the one who doesn't deserve the uniform you're wearing." Daniel laughed louder, his tone challenging and contemptuous. "What do you think you can do to me? I'm a police officer, and the law is on my side. You're just an ordinary woman. You should know your place before you get yourself into trouble." Daniel's words were not only an insult, but also a challenge. But Sarah didn't flinch. She felt the tense silence that enveloped the entire grocery store, everyone's eyes watching her every move. This was no longer a personal argument. It was a moment for her to prove that calmness and steadfastness could triumph over arrogance and prejudice. Sarah stood upright, her shoulders stiff, as if she were facing an enemy on the battlefield, rather than a man in a police uniform. Her eyes gleamed with determination, unwavering even as Daniel's words were full of mockery and insult. The surrounding crowd grew quieter, as if they were all holding their breath, waiting to see what she would do next. She took a step forward, unafraid, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "You can think of me as anyone you want," she said, "but remember that arrogance and contempt for others don't hide moral shortcomings. I'm not here to fight for power with you, but I'm not going to let you continue to abuse it." Daniel frowned, his confidence beginning to crack under Sarah's decisive demeanor. He looked at her, trying to find a sign of insecurity or fear, but all he saw was a woman as solid as a bronze statue. The crowd was now fully attentive to the confrontation, some even holding up their phones to record every moment. "Don't act noble in front of me," Daniel snarled, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're nothing but a troublemaker. If I wanted to, I could kick you out of here right now." Sarah didn't smile, but the corners of her mouth twitched slightly, an expression of frightening calmness. "If you think your power allows you to behave like that," she said, "then I'll let the law answer that you're wrong to think I would be afraid." The atmosphere in the grocery store was frozen, the tension palpable as the two stood face to face. Daniel, with his large and aggressive appearance, faced Sarah, a woman who wasn't tall, didn't wear a uniform, but whose demeanor and eyes exuded undeniable authority. "You may continue to insult me," Sarah said, her voice calm but weighty, "but remember that I'm not here alone. There are plenty of witnesses here, and if you think you can use words to put me down, you're wrong. I'm not standing here to defend my personal honor. I'm standing here to defend the values I've spent my life preserving." The entire grocery store seemed to fall into absolute silence. The crowd, though no one dared to speak, made it clear through their eyes that they were on Sarah's side. Daniel, while still maintaining a tough appearance, couldn't hide his embarrassment as he realized the situation was spiraling out of his control. Sarah remained steadfast, like a beacon of resilience in the midst of a storm of injustice and prejudice. In the face of a tense situation, as Daniel began to lose control, Sarah remained surprisingly calm under the scrutiny and sometimes fear of the crowd. She understood that her every action and word at this moment not only affected her, but also proved the importance of justice and righteousness. Daniel took a step forward, his voice becoming harder and more aggressive. "I'm warning you," he said, "don't make this situation worse. I'm the police, and I have the right to deal with you right here." His words rang out, but instead of frightening Sarah, they only added to her determination. She slowly pulled her phone out of her pocket, not in a panic, but in a decisive manner, as if she had planned this all along. "You have your rights," she said, her voice soft but sharp as steel, "and I have mine too. Let's see on whose side the law will be." She dialed a number quickly, her voice calm as the call connected. "Hello, I need support at the Central Grocery Store. There's a police officer here who's abusing his power and threatening people. I need the competent authorities to come here immediately." Daniel was stunned, his eyes wide open, as he realized the situation was no longer under his control. The crowd began to whisper loudly, and some people stopped reporting to call the authorities themselves. Sarah, despite standing in the midst of chaos, maintained her calm demeanor. "What do you think you're doing?" Daniel roared, taking another step toward Sarah. But she didn't back down. Her eyes looked directly at him without a hint of fear. "I'm doing what you're supposed to be doing," she said, her voice firm but not raised, defending fairness and responsibility. At that moment, the sound of police sirens echoed outside, signaling that help had arrived. The crowd dispersed to make way as the officers entered. Sarah slowly pointed her hand at Daniel, her gaze not leaving him. "This is the person you need to address," she said. "All of his actions have been documented and fully witnessed." Daniel, who had now lost his arrogance, began to look embarrassed. The confidence on his face disappeared, replaced by confusion and anxiety. Meanwhile, Sarah stood still, calm as if she had anticipated all of this. She knew that her intelligence and bravery had helped her overcome this challenge, not just to protect herself, but to prove that justice always needs to be served. When the grocery store doors opened and Mayor Michael Carter walked in, the already tense atmosphere became even more serious. He appeared with a commanding presence, his sharp eyes sweeping through the crowd before stopping at Sarah. His footsteps were decisive, like a man who had come to solve all injustices. Daniel, who had been confused before, was now completely stiff. The usual arrogance on his face disappeared, replaced by a look of bewilderment and fear. He bowed his head and stammered, trying to explain. "Mr. Mayor, this is just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything. It's just that she..." But Michael didn't let him finish. "Shut up," he said, his voice quiet but authoritative, interrupting Daniel. "I came here because of an urgent call from Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a person I have great respect for. Your behavior has been reported and witnessed by many people. Don't think your loose justification can erase what you've done." Sarah stood still, her eyes not leaving Michael. She felt a slight relief knowing that justice was about to be served, but her expression remained steadfast, a reminder that this struggle wasn't over. Michael walked toward her, his eyes softening. "Colonel Mitchell, I hope you're not injured or harmed in any way. This behavior is unacceptable and will be dealt with thoroughly." Sarah nodded, her voice calm but still assertive. "I'm fine, but this isn't just about me. This is about those in power needing to be held accountable for their actions. If I hadn't stood up today, there would have been many others who would have been treated unfairly." Michael turned to look at Daniel, his eyes cold. "You've abused your power, insulted a high-ranking military officer, and lost public trust in the police force. You don't deserve to wear this uniform." A female witness from the crowd stepped forward, handing her phone with a video recording of the incident. Michael glanced at it, and his face became even more serious. "This behavior is intolerable," he declared. Then, turning to the police officers who had just arrived, he ordered, "Strip him of his weapons and insignia immediately. An investigation will be opened, and he will be subject to all appropriate punishments." Daniel, now completely devastated, was speechless as the officers carried out Michael's orders. The crowd standing outside began to applaud, a tribute to Sarah and the mayor's decisive action. Sarah, though she hadn't sought honor, felt a deep sense of relief. When Michael turned to her, his voice was full of respect. Colonel Mitchell, this city needs people like you to remind us of responsibility and integrity. I'm sorry for what you went through. Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you, Mayor. I just hope that this will bring about real change. Michael nodded, his face solemn but sympathetic. We're going to make sure of that. Sarah left the grocery store, stepping out into the sun, feeling her heart lighter. But she knew that the fight for fairness and accountability never stopped, and she was ready to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for all those who couldn't stand up on their own. After being stripped of his badge and weapon at the scene, Daniel Harris was taken away in heavy silence. His face was devoid of its original arrogance, replaced by fear and confusion. As the police car rolled away from the grocery store, the crowd had not yet dispersed. The chatter and critical gazes continued to follow him like a ghost. At the police station, Daniel was questioned immediately. Video evidence was presented, along with testimony from witnesses that made his actions irrefutable. The head of the police department, informed by Mayor Michael Carter, stated that Daniel's behavior was a stain on the entire force. On the same day, he was officially suspended from work and faced a comprehensive investigation. The news spread quickly, not only in the local community, but also in the media. Videos of Daniel abusing his power and treating Sarah rudely were shared millions of times, sparking a wave of outrage. People who had been treated unfairly by Daniel in the past began to come forward, sharing their stories and making his situation even worse. Daniel, once proud of his position and power, now faced an inevitable downfall. People who had once known him began to distance themselves, and former colleagues expressed their disappointment. In the small house where he lived alone, Daniel sat with his head down, clearly feeling the weight of the mistakes he had made. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell continued her life with humility and determination. She didn't seek attention, but she received countless thanks and admiration from the community. Her actions not only forced Daniel to face the consequences, but also sparked a larger discussion about responsibility and ethics in law enforcement. In the end, Daniel Harris not only lost his job, but also faced legal charges, including abuse of power and threats with weapons. In subsequent trials, he bowed his head, no longer showing any sign of the arrogance he once had. That was the price he paid for forgetting that power comes with responsibility, and that injustice has no place in a just society. After the shocking event, Sarah Mitchell's life didn't return to the way it was before. The story of her courage quickly spread, making her a symbol for those who dared to stand up against injustice. The press, media, and even activists praised Sarah as a modern-day hero. But for Sarah, she didn't feel like a hero. She simply saw her actions as the responsibility of a soldier and a citizen who needed to protect the values of equity. In the weeks that followed, the impact of the event became apparent. Local police forces came under closer scrutiny, and changes in the selection and training process were implemented. Seminars on responsibility and ethics in law enforcement were held, with Sarah invited as a keynote speaker. Standing in front of hundreds of people, she shared her story, not to receive applause, but to remind everyone that power is only meaningful when used to protect, not to oppress. As for Daniel Harris, his career was officially over. The public trial not only caused him to lose his liberty temporarily, but also his honor forever. The community turned its back on him, and those who had once supported him couldn't forgive his abuse of power. In the darkness of his life, Daniel began to understand the bitter lesson that pride and injustice not only destroy others, but also lead to self-destruction. Sarah, after all, didn't stop at personal stories. She became an inspiration for many movements fighting for justice and equality. Articles and videos documenting her actions were shared everywhere, encouraging people not to be afraid when facing injustice. However, Sarah still maintained a simple and consistent demeanor. She continued to dedicate herself to the military, a living demonstration that true strength doesn't lie in power, but in integrity and the courage to do the right thing. Every time she looked back on the incident, she didn't feel regret, but instead a quiet pride, knowing that her actions had contributed to changing a small part of society for the better. For her, this story wasn't an end, but a reminder that the fight for justice always requires courage and determination. and she was willing to face any other challenges in her journey to defend the values she believed in. Sarah Mitchell's legacy wasn't just documented in newspapers and videos that captured the moment she stood in the midst of a storm of criticism and threats. It also brought about profound changes in the way society viewed justice and responsibility. Her steadfast steps in the struggle against injustice created a wave of inspiration, not only in the military, but also in the community, especially for women.